Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to author Sarah Ashwood with Ashes on the Earth and Ariza, Land Beyond the Sunset, a wicked, imaginative tale. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me here. Very excited.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, I loved Ashes on the Earth. How did you come up with this? And just the whole, this was a type of book that if you never read shapeshifters or you didn't believe in them, you might actually believe that they really exist.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
It was so well done. I couldn't put it down.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. The idea was originally I wanted to do a mafia-style romance novel with the same idea where a normal girl gets sucked unwittingly into a mafia war. But I don't do non-fantasy very well. So I decided to take it and give it a fantasy twist. And I knew I wanted to do shapeshifters, but I didn't want to do just your standard bears or wolves or that kind of thing. So that was where the idea of finding creatures from all over the world and incorporating them as shapeshifters came from.
Yeah, you used all these different gods and the protector of one of those Greek islands. That was really well spun.
Well, thank you. One of my favorite parts of writing this series was looking up creatures from all over the world, from different folklore and mythology, and finding ways to just incorporate things we may not see all that often in fantasy and weave them into the series.
I know, but it was so realistic. It was fun. And it gives new meaning to like that phrase, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah. That sort of becomes the theme of the book and actually the entire series for Ellie, the main character, especially.
Well, do you have a background in writing, mythology?
I've incorporated it some into some of my other books. I don't know about my background, except I did take Greek and Roman mythology in college, and that was the only college class I took where I scored an A+ on every assignment. I've always really enjoyed Greek and Roman mythology. And the rest of it, I'm not as familiar with, but I just tried to do a lot of research and make sure that I had things as accurate to the mythology as I could.
What about the world building and the places that you took us to? How did you create that?
I set the series in Fort Worth because one of my sisters and her family lives there. And I'm pretty used to the area. And it's the biggest big city I'm by that I have any familiarity with. So it was fun to set it in a big city setting that I actually knew. I've actually visited the Botanic Gardens where one of the big fight scenes takes place. I'm not even sure why I decided to put such a bloody conflict in such a beautiful setting. It's a really beautiful park. But it was fun to go back to the Botanic Gardens after I had written the book and look around and be like, it's interesting to visualize now this book taking place here in this area where I've actually been. So that was kind of how that all came about.
Wow. What about that? The where she ends up, that whole housing complex that you described, was that a particular place?
That was inspired by just driving around Fort Worth and some of the surrounding areas and just seeing some of the big, beautiful Texas mansions. There are some, they say everything's bigger in Texas. And I think there's some truth to that. So that was just inspired by some of the places that I've seen in the Fort Worth area.
Have you ever been to Greece?
I have not. The only place outside the United States that I've traveled is Canada, but it's one of my life goals to visit Europe.
Well, what about one of the main characters? How did you come up with his whole persona?
Carter?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Talos. That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. I don't exactly remember how I settled on the Talos as Carter's shapeshifter alter, except that I remember when I was researching, the Talos was a creature that only showed up in one Greek legend, if I recall correctly. And I wanted Carter to be a really singular, unique shapeshifter. And so that was how I kind of wove him together, and his uniqueness as the Talos comes into play even more in the next 3 books, I should say. And it was also a little bit of a lesser known Greek myth, so that was another reason that I decided to put it central in my series.
That was great. It made me investigate it a little bit more. I was like, wow. How long have you been writing?
I started writing when I was 18, so half my life ago. In fact, the other book you have there, Aresia, when I was, the original draft of that, I wrote when I was 18. And it's been through many revisions since then. But that was right there. That was my first book that I wrote. And I've written several novels, lots of short stories, and hopefully have improved from that rough original draft. But it takes, just like with anything else, lots and lots of practice.
What triggered Aricia's story? Were you trying to escape from a family member's wedding?
No, I was... It was funny. I lived out in the country then, and I would go running down dirt roads, just like my main character Hannah does. And there really was, in my neighbor's pasture, there was a huge old stump. And when I would run past it sometimes at night, you're a little on edge anyway, because I was surrounded by the woods and the trees. And sometimes out of the corner of my eye, it would trick my vision, and I would think that stump was like a bear standing there. Well, then one time I thought, well, what if it wasn't a bear? What if it was a visitor from outer space or another world? And that was kind of how the whole Aresia idea came about.
Oh, that's great. That played out really nicely. Now, what about kids and people who seem not to be able to defend themselves?
Yeah,
because in Ashes on Earth, she's always standing up for somebody. She goes to save a child she never met. She saved the mother later.
Yeah, so unlike a lot of fantasy, and unlike even my Aresia series, Ellie is not a character with magic or superpower per se, but I wanted her to have a really distinct characteristic and a really powerful aspect to her character, and that is how protective she is of other people, of her family, of Jackson Costas, the little boy that she saves at the beginning of the story. Sometimes I would say Ellie doesn't necessarily think things through before she leaps to protect other people, but that's because her nature is to try to take care of other people. So I hoped that came across clearly in the book.
Oh, it did. It definitely did. And Talos was really well done. He was a protector. He's a giant bronze man built by, can't pronounce this one, Hephaestus?
I think it was Hephaestus, I believe,
Yes.
the god that worked the forge and built armor for the other gods, if I remember my mythology correctly.
Right. And then he was really a machine, but then he was given life by God's blood. That was really good. I love how you twisted all the main points of this character into the story.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, and then the whole thing with like Carter and Ellie, the two main characters on the surface, they clash, but then underneath they're both really alike, with Carter as the Talos being a protector and Ellie having this protective streak. So that's kind of their common ground between the two of them.
And you left us with a big cliffhanger. So when will the other books be out?
They are all actually out. The last book was released a few months ago. They've been out for a few months.
Oh, good. So there's a total of 4 in the series. Will it get any longer?
I don't think so. I think I've wrapped up their world pretty well, unless I decided to do one with some side characters. I did think the third main character, Detective Candace Ewing, I've kind of thought about maybe branching off with a series with her, but I don't have any definite plans right now with that. And
you're a mom of 4. So that explains a lot in this book, because it dealt a lot with manners, how you treat other people to get a good response. And then you have the human taken to another world, a savior of sorts. And it was just to continue to keep expecting the unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah, Hannah in that series is a very reluctant heroine, especially at first. But again, I wanted to paint a picture of somebody that was completely normal, living a completely normal life, and then what would it be like to be told, you're the prophesied savior of another world, you know? I feel like under those circumstances, anybody would be a little reluctant at first.
Yeah. Especially the guy that shows up on the stump, too.
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely somebody you'd be wary of.
Right, especially at first, yeah.
All right, what about the way you twisted in the use of slang and confusion? Is that from dealing with your children?
I think that was more just thinking how we all talk a little bit differently depending on where we're from. And if you went to all of a sudden a different world that was kind of a more, I guess, old-fashioned setting, they probably wouldn't understand your slang so well. You would have to clear some things up.
Yeah, she had to clear up a lot of things.
Yeah, she did.
But it was funny how you told the other side of the story to show how the confusion comes about. That was really well woven into the whole storyline.
Well, I guess I took a little bit of a risk changing from first person to third person so I could try to show the other side of the story, but most readers seem okay with it. That it's not a point of view switch that I've seen all that often, but I did do it in both books, so that's comfortable for me.
No, it flowed really nicely in both books. Although I have to say, Ashes on the Earth is my favorite. It was so good. I mean, they're both extremely well written, well put together, imaginative, and it's, you know, those stories that really hook you in so that you're up late reading it and you can't put it down because you just have to find out what's going to happen next. I love those. So it kept me tuned in. You know, I didn't want to stop, but I just love the whole, because it's so, Ashes on the earth is just so completely different than most of the shapeshifter stories out there. So it was enjoyable to read.
I appreciate that. I did try to make it somewhat different with how I created the shapeshifters. And it was a little easier, I feel like, to make it more fast paced than, say, Aresia, because there was less world building. You know, in Aresia, you kind of have to set the context for this entire other world. But with Ashes, we are here on Earth. There's just a whole other aspect of Earth that we humans, you know, are not familiar with. So it does kind of dive in with a bang and not let go. Or that's how I try to make it.
Wow, it was wonderful. So what's next on your agenda? Do you have another series coming out?
I do. Aresia, right there, the first book, Aresia Land Beyond the Sunset, is the first book of a trilogy, and all three of those are published. And now I am doing a follow-up series to that original trilogy, expanding on the world and using some of the side characters that you see in the original trilogy. I'm doing a 4-book series with those. First book is out, and I'm writing the rough draft of the second book right now.
With 4 kids, when do you find time to write?
I don't have a lot. Not a lot of time. I mean, I just have to squeeze it in when I can. Usually during my baby's nap time is when I try to get my writing done.
What's the age range of your children?
The oldest is 10 and the youngest is almost 2. So they're pretty close together.
Wow. Those are all busy ages where they're running around getting into things.
Yeah, so now we have the oldest 2 boys are playing flag football, so we're into the whole sports and taking them to practice, and it is a busy time, but writing allows me to keep my creativity going.
What kind of work did you do or before you got married and settled down that helped contribute to the way you write?
I got my college degree. I have a degree in English, and I tutored other children for a while. And then I wound up getting married and becoming a mom, and that's pretty much been my life ever since, except for my writing. Like I said, that allows me to keep aspects of my personality. You know, when you're a mom, you pretty much get sunk into being a mom.
I know.
Not that that's a bad thing.
No, but you can see a lot of the way you write. It makes sense now because you are a mom, because it has that nice soft touch to it in different places where you really need it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Ooh, really well done.
Well, one of my goals as a mom is to keep my stories at a level where like teenagers and adults can all enjoy them. That's something that's really important to me because I donated a lot of books to libraries and given them to kids, not younger children, but like teenagers and things like that. I want to write really interesting stories that just anybody can enjoy.
Well, I thought they were all fantastically well done. And I like that they were clean, you know, and I think as a teenager, I would have probably loved the whole series, both of them.
Right. I tried to write books that I would have enjoyed as a teenager, but that I can still enjoy even as in my mid-30s.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not near 30, but I love them. Maybe, I don't know. It was fresh. It was exciting. It was about making the right choices, thinking about what you do or how to handle yourself after you made the wrong choice.
Yeah, I do. I try to write characters that I do try to show them making wrong choices or making rash decisions because I want to show that they're human. We're all human. We all say the wrong thing and make the wrong choices sometimes. And I feel like that when I read books with characters like that, it helps them to be more relatable to me versus the characters that you sometimes see that you feel like, well, they're just superhuman. They never do anything wrong.
I know. There are a lot of those. So when you're researching can you give us an idea of how you research and how do you remember all these people? Do you have like little sticky notes somewhere?
I generally have a Word document, and I'll start with Google. And sometimes Google will lead you to great resources, sometimes not so much. Sometimes I have to go to the library and find books, but I'll usually just jot down my notes in different Google documents and save those. I might have 5 or 6 different documents saved for one book that I'm writing.
Wow. And how do you keep track of the characters and the settings?
Kind of the same thing. I usually jot down notes about the characters and the setting and the background and all that kind of stuff, and just in different Google documents. It's probably not the most organized way of keeping it all straight, but it works for me.
I always wonder about that, especially when the characters' personalities are such that they have certain characteristics. And sometimes authors will make the mistake of changing it later in the book. And it's like, oh, but this isn't really something they would do. But you didn't do that at all. That's why I figured you were really organized, and because it was smooth all the way through. There's nothing to make me jump back and question if that was something that the character would or wouldn't do. And Talos is difficult.
He was a little more difficult, but I will admit I have a lot of beta readers, and that's one thing I ask them, all of my beta readers, is if you feel like this character does something really out of character, or there's a problem with if there's glitches or things like that you notice, to please let me know. Because like you said, it's easy to forget and lose track of things, but beta readers help a lot, especially for someone like me.
How do you get beta readers?
A couple of them are family members, a couple are friends, and a few of them are just fans that had read other books, and they follow my Facebook page or my Facebook group, and I just reached out to them and I was like, would you like to be a beta reader for this? Give me your critical feedback before it's published. And I've got a really great group of beta readers, really.
Interesting. And were you self-published, or did you have a publisher?
Ouija and Ashes on the Earth, both of those series are self-published. I have 3 other books right now that are with an agent that we're looking to go the traditional route. So I'm looking to be a hybrid author.
Wow. Well, now that you get all the feedback from beta readers, it won't be as bad going through all that.
It's been a long journey to get to where I'm at today.
What advice would you give other authors or young people that were thinking of writing and working with beta readers, especially, how to take criticism?
Yes, that's one of the hardest things, but I tell people when they ask me, first off, don't take it personally. It's not aimed at you. None of us are perfect. Your stories may not be for everybody, because we all have different tastes. And if your beta readers are really, especially if 2 or 3 of them remark on the same thing, then it probably is a problem. But if it's just one beta reader saying one thing, you might be able to discount. It's just kind of a matter of figuring out whether it's really a problem or whether it's the beta reader's personal taste as to what they're seeing. But be sure to try to weigh everything that they tell you and then go from there.
What has been the hardest part about being an author for you?
I think finding the time to do marketing the way I should. Marketing is a bear. You have to learn Amazon ads, Facebook ads, all these different things, and that takes a while. And as a mom of 4, I'm pretty pressed for time, so that's the hardest part of it.
What about interacting with your fans on Facebook and other platforms? How does that help fuel your work? does it drive you to create more?
It does. Readers enjoyed the Aresia series, and I had several of them contact me or ask me on Facebook or contact me directly and ask if there were going to be more books in that world. And so that's what made me decide to write a follow-up series, was just readers writing in and asking me, hey, you going to write more books in this or what? So I decided to do it.
Oh, that's great. Any other advice you'd give young people?
I would say if you enjoy reading a lot, you enjoy writing, get that first draft down. Don't sit there and worry too much about any of the problems you may have in your manuscript. That you can always edit later, and editing is your best friend. Edit. But get that rough draft down, enjoy the process, and then go into editing, because that's the hard part.
Do you have an editor, or do you edit yourself?
I self-edit, and then I hire a professional editor. But I self-edit my manuscript a couple of times before I send it to an editor to go over and what I've done. Yeah.
Oh, it was just so well done. I didn't find any mistakes, which makes it more fun, because I really look for mistakes in books. But they were both so enjoyable and such a great escape.
Oh, thank you. At the end of the day, I feel like we all need an escape sometimes, and that's another reason I do what I do. It's also an escape for me, being able to write the stories.
Oh, what about the names? Do you take the names from anybody in particular? Friends? Fans?
In the Aresia series is named after one of my sisters. I have another novel, Knight's Rebirth, with a princess named Mercy, that was named after my other sister. So sometimes I do use friends and family's names.
So when you're creating the character, is it part of their personality as well?
It is. Names usually come to me when I'm first envisioning the character, or I have to figure out their names very early on.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing so much about your series and where you're going with them.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being on here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a great series for a young person you know, you're going to love these. Even if you're adult, you're going to love these. We'll see you soon.